Warning, the following video contains opinions that are mine and not anyone else's. All viewers of Banditex are encouraged to form their own opinion and to not follow mine directly. Hello everyone! Welcome to what I hope will be a fun yearly event for the channel, SonicTember. As I have stated in my update video, you'll be getting a series of Sonic reviews in September, day after day. I hope you like Sonic, otherwise these videos are just ones you can skip yearly. Aw yeah, I'm excited to finally tackle Sonic the Hedgehog. While I haven't loved this series as long as Super Mario or Crash Bandicoot, Sonic has been a big part of me ever since I turned 12. I won't ramble on too long about my history with this series, at least in this video, but just know that Sonic is a pretty big part of me. Sonic the Hedgehog was created to act as a mascot character to Sega in a way Super Mario was to Nintendo, who at the time dominated the video game industry. While the Sega Genesis was superior to the Nintendo Entertainment System in terms of graphics and sound, it lacked a proper mascot. Alex Kidd was seen internally as the face of Sega, but the character wasn't strong enough to stand out from Mario. Sega then made a new character with a 90s as hell attitude and gave him the ability to move fast. These all came together to form the character we now know as Sonic. The original Sega Genesis game was released on June 23rd, 1991 in North America. Developed by the newly formed Sonic team, the game was a smash hit and made Nintendo fans turn their heads. On top of being something special and new, the American release came a few months before Super Mario World, so I am certain some Mario fans from the NES days chose the Genesis over the SNES just to give Sonic a shot. The premise for this game is incredibly basic. The evil Dr. Eggman wants to build his own city for nefarious purposes and aims to enslave all the small animals on South Island to do his dirty work. The speedy blue hedgehog named Sonic says,
"That's no good,"
and aims to stop him. Eggman is also looking to obtain the Chaos Emeralds, which hold mysterious powers. So on top of making sure Eggman's plans get foiled, you have to look for the emeralds to make sure he never grabs them. It's basic stuff, but it helps that Sonic isn't just saving some girl to win her heart like Mario does in his games. I don't know where else to say this, so I'm gonna throw this bullet point in right here. Dr. Eggman was once called Dr. Robotnik in North America, and has been referred to as Eggman since about 2001. Some fans absolutely hate the Eggman name, but I have personally preferred Eggman because in Japan, his name has always been Eggman. Sure, the early cartoons and comics used Robotnik heavily, but the Eggman name has still slipped through the cracks several times in this classic era. Various things made by Eggman have egg in their name, the Doctor has been shown to love eggs in various forms of media. Tails even called him Eggman in the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon.
Guess again, Eggman.
Technically, the name change happened in Sonic Adventure's US release, which was 1999, but the implementation is interesting. He goes by Robotnik, but Sonic and friends say Eggman as an insult.
"Whatever you say, Eggman."
By Sonic Adventure 2, he embraces the Eggman name and goes by that going forward, while still being a part of the Robotnik family.
Citizens of Earth, lend me your ears and listen to me very carefully. My name is Dr. Eggman.
His current name is technically Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik, so both of these names are technically correct, and it is similar to how Tails' name is really Miles Prower. Because of this tangent I just went on, I will call this character Eggman, even in my videos covering the classic era. Sorry to those that hate this, but it just makes things easier for me, and I just prefer this name over Robotnik. Sure, Robotnik is scarier, but look at this guy! He's fat, has a pink nose, builds silly crab robots. He's goofy, and I like that about him. On the surface, Sonic the Hedgehog is your standard 2D side-scroller. Your goal is to get from the beginning of the stage to the end. Each world, or zone in this case, contains 3 stages, or acts as this game calls them. Sonic has a very basic moveset. He can jump, roll, run, and that's it. Sonic is also frail, as taking any damage will result in a life being lost. Sonic can collect rings, which not only gives Sonic an extra life upon grabbing 100, but will protect Sonic from death, as he can get hit an infinite amount of times, so as long as you can hold on to at least 1 ring. Being a hedgehog, Sonic curls up into a ball when jumping or rolling. This allows the blue blur to damage most enemies when doing either one of these actions. Various power-ups can be found in monitors in each act, which can give Sonic 10 rings, a shield to give him a free hit and keep every ring, temporary invincibility, and even speed shoes, allowing Sonic to run even faster. Sonic the Hedgehog may seem like an easy, possibly boring game, but what elevates Sonic above generic platformer number 259 is Sonic's momentum. Sonic has weight to him, and players can use this to gain some serious speed. One thing players will need to learn is how to roll effectively. Rolling down a slope will allow Sonic to move faster than he could while just running, and this helps add to Sonic's replayability. Most first runs of Sonic games will be a little painful, but to those that decide to come back, they can improve their runs by clearing acts faster and getting hit less. This, combined with the simplicity of the gameplay, makes Sonic the awesome game that it is. Another thing that helps is that levels contain many alternate pathways that can either reward you with tons of rings and 1-ups, or just a faster path altogether. Sonic's core gameplay isn't all sunshine and rainbows though. Since Sonic is capable of moving faster than other characters at the time, Sonic Team threw in some levels that go against what made some zones great. Levels like Green Hill and Starlight have multiple paths and can be cleared in under a minute, but only if you're good enough. Zones like Marble and Labyrinth, on the other hand, are far more restrictive in comparison. These stages are infamous enough to where some people are willing to shut the game off after starting these zones. This is something I have heard many times online. While these levels aren't unplayable, they could have been better. Marble has too much slow platform writing, and only Act 3 has branching paths, and not that many I might add. Labyrinth is full of water, but Sonic cannot swim, so he must slowly wade through deep water and collect air bubbles to stay alive. Act 1 has an awesome skip if you're good enough and know where to find it, but it can't save this one. Both of these zones just don't complement Sonic's physics-based gameplay very well. As for the ones that are fun to play, these can have a few problems of their own. The game doesn't do the best job giving players more screen space to see what's coming up. This is an issue many have had not just with this game, but its sequels as well. Some may adjust, some won't. I got used to it, but I know not everyone will. I've ignored this point for a while, but upon reaching the end of Act 3, Sonic will run into Dr. Eggman and battle him. Eggman bosses each have a unique gimmick to them, and it helps close zones out. The fights are easy and simple, but since each zone has its own boss, I think it makes these better as a result. This isn't like Boom Boom from Super Mario Bros. 3, where the fights rarely change. These are harmless, though the Labyrinth boss can be annoying, since your goal isn't to beat Eggman, but just avoid drowning. But the large abundance of obstacles, and the world's sexiest fat man getting in the way of your jumps doesn't help either. Eggman will always take 8 hits to defeat, but while that element is predictable, the constant variety in the battles helps keep new players guessing. If you can clear Acts 1 and 2 in a zone with 50 rings or more, a giant ring will be present just past the goalpost. Jumping into this ring is where you will find the special stages. If you can find and collect the Chaos Emerald, you will win. Now this is where Sonic 1 begins to really suffer for many. For starters, once the post stops spinning, Sonic will run off screen automatically. Why? If you're new, the goalpost will appear with no warning and you will miss the giant ring, and if you attempt to turn Sonic around, he'll just run off if you're too slow. The idea of bringing 50 rings to the end can be daunting as well, since just getting hit once will make Sonic lose all his rings. While Sonic can pick them up, the maximum he can grab is about 20 at a time, so if you've mopped the entire act clear of rings and get hit the end, you will not be able to enter a special stage. If the player is too close to the goal sign, you will become locked in that final stretch too, meaning you cannot turn back and grab more rings if needed. Just getting in is a bitch, but playing the levels themselves is another story. All special stages are rotating mazes. Sonic is pulled down constantly by gravity, and all you can do is jump. There's bumpers everywhere, switches that speed up or slow the stage down, or even change the rotation. It's just a mess, and the background can be a bit distracting. All emeralds are found inside crystals too, which take a while to break. And remember, the level is rotating while you wait. Since there are 6 zones and only 2 acts in each allow you to grab these, this means you only have 10 chances to nab all 6, since Scrap Brain Zone won't spawn giant rings due to a bug in the game's code. If you manage to not grab any emeralds by Spring Yard Act 1, you might as well just reset the game. You might be wondering, what do the emeralds do? The ending is altered slightly, and that's it. If you ask me, it isn't worth the hassle, but while this alternate ending is considered the good ending, it still isn't very rewarding. One thing that will be consistent with this series going forward is the soundtrack. Sonic games typically have some awesome tunes in them, and Sonic 1 is no different. The music for this game was made as a collaboration with the Japanese pop group Dreams Come True, and their work is simply a joy to the ears. I think the Sega Genesis sound chip is one that is easy to fuck up, as a lot of sounds on this console can sound like IBS if done poorly, but Sonic 1 is a game that avoids this trap. Give the OST a listen, you won't regret it. The graphics are also very well done. Compared to Super Mario World, which came out a year prior in Japan, Sonic 1 looks a lot better. The levels are all varied in their colors and theming, and the main protagonist and antagonist are animated well. Sonic looking at the player in the idle animation may seem like a minor detail, but for the time, it was huge, as characters like Mario would just stand there looking dead ahead. The game does have some moments of slowdown on some occasions, but it isn't enough to harm the game in my opinion. So what is the verdict on the original Sonic the Hedgehog? I like coming back to Sonic 1 whenever I get the chance to do it, and it rarely disappoints. I give Sonic 1 on the Sega Genesis a 7 out of 10. While not the best score I can give out, this is still an admirable one. What really hurts Sonic 1 is an assortment of zones that aren't fun to play. 2 bad zones may not sound terrible, but it does when you realize that there are 6 in total. Plus, if Sonic Team wanted us to go out of our way to collect the Chaos Emeralds, they should have made the process more fun and rewarding. If you want to play Sonic 1, you have tons of options. Sega has re-released this game many times in various compilations and individual releases too. All of these are relatively similar to one another, but 2 versions stand out to me. The first of these that we're going to look at is Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis, released for the Game Boy Advance in 2006. November 14th, 2006 to be exact. The same day they gave us that game. To coincide with the series' 15th anniversary. To start, why the Game Boy Advance? The Nintendo DS launched in 2004, and not only that, Sega already had their toes wet with Sonic Rush on the Nintendo DS in 2005. Now DS models at the time were capable of playing GBA games, but wouldn't just doing a DS port make more sense? Admittedly, the GBA running a 16-bit platformer isn't out of the question. Several SNES classics have made their way to the GBA prior, like Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island. These games came out great, and are debatably the best versions of those games, but those were made during the GBA's prime, so Sonic is already looking bad just for being late to the party. Now, I have heard many horror stories of people that have played this version of the game, and at the same time, I haven't seen anyone make much progress in this game. So I'm going to be going in relatively blind for the first time ever in this video. Wish me luck, because there's a pretty good chance that SonicTember will be cancelled after this first episode. Here we go. To start, the Sega logo is cut off before it even finishes, and it moves pretty slowly. The next thing to note is the audio. It's pretty shit. The music from the original is present, but sounds so bad it can be downright irritating at points. You're better off putting on some tunes of your own. As for the sound effects, some are completely different, where it can be startling at points. The biggest change this game offers, aside from a save feature, is the anniversary mode. It's just the spin dash. No extra characters, no elemental shields, just a spin dash. At least it's here, right? It doesn't even work correctly. You can't rev it up like in Sonic 2, and enemies can hurt you while you're in your ball form. There are 2 gameplay issues that slaughter Sonic Genesis. The first is the screen crunch. Some would argue that the original had this too, but this version has tons of it, both vertically and horizontally. Now, I'd like to think that I am good at Sonic 1. I have managed to beat this game without dying a single time before, but even I have instances of being smacked by a surprise badnik. The physics are also poorly remade. If Sonic runs into a wall at full speed and jumps, he'll keep flying forward. On the other side of the coin, pressing the opposite direction in midair will immediately kill Sonic's momentum. While this could help with platforming, it isn't one-to-one with the original. which is important for a port or remake to do. Rolling also doesn't work like it should. Sonic just can't roll around to reach higher areas here, meaning some spots, like the hidden section at the start of Spring Yard Zone Act 1, are impossible to reach. While the physics and standard gameplay are a train wreck, the special stages are arguably easier. Sonic can change direction on a whim in the air in these, but there is still tons of jank here. It's possible to hit the R sphere multiple times while just sitting on it, causing the stage to just wiggle. The crystals do break faster at least, but these levels are pretty poor either way. If you beat the game, you unlock a jukebox in the main menu. You know, if you want to listen to the shitty music. If you collect the Chaos Emeralds, you can listen to the sound effects, but if you manage to get all 6 on your first go, you won't get the sound effects. You'll have to do another full playthrough of the game to keep this option available on your cartridge. The mere fact that they fucked up unlockables in this game leaves me speechless. Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis is an awful port, but I'm pretty sure you all knew that by now. In fact, this is the worst game I have reviewed thus far. I give this piece of shit a 1 out of 10. The only reason this game managed to score a 1 is just because deep down, this is still Sonic 1. It's a very bad version of Sonic 1, but it's still Sonic 1. Had this game been something completely original, it probably would have gotten a 0. So this game is super lucky that I was that generous with it. Hell, there were issues I ignored, like the terrible performance, so you could make the argument that I was too nice to this port. I just can't believe that Sega thought this was okay to release for the series' 15th anniversary, and the fact that they did is simply criminal. The final version of this game that I'm going to be looking at for this video is the one found in Sonic Origins. Originally, I had a full review of the 2013 Android port, but this portion of the review was completed back when everyone thought Sonic Origins was quietly cancelled. Sonic Origins is far more convenient to play simply for the fact that it's on every modern console, in addition to Steam. This new version of Sonic 1 is more or less the same as the original game. It runs on new code, but it mirrors the Genesis version so well that it can be hard to tell the difference at times. The biggest change this version has over the original is that the game is now in widescreen. Any visibility issues you would have had from the original game are now a thing of the past. Other extras include a spin dash that actually works, and new characters. You can play as Tails, who can fly just like he did in Sonic 3, as well as Knuckles, who is slower and can't jump as high, but can glide and climb walls. A few of the levels are also modified slightly to include extras that only Tails and Knuckles can reach to help make their inclusions more special. Other new bonuses include the drop dash from Sonic Mania, a new special stage, the ability to transform into Super Sonic, and even elemental shields. If you want to play Sonic 1 and want the absolute best and official way to do it, play this version. I won't be scoring this version as I don't plan on reviewing compilations, right now at least, but please play this one. The Genesis original is still a solid game, but this one is just so much better. Now, I know I said the Sonic Origins release was going to be the final version of Sonic 1 I was going to be reviewing today, but I lied. You see, in 1991, on the Sega Master System, we actually had another version of Sonic the Hedgehog, simply called Sonic the Hedgehog. At first glance, Sonic on the Master System looks like what you would expect. The same game as the Genesis version, but scaled back. We get a similar title screen, the theme song is here, we begin in Green Hill, and the music for that is here too. Sonic even plays just like he did on the Genesis, so no insta-shields or spin dashes. Hell, the game's story in the manual is word for word the exact same as the Genesis one. It won't take very long to notice that something's changed. While the Green Hill Zone we know on the Genesis had many alternate paths and verticality, this one in contrast is flatter and more straightforward. In case you failed to acknowledge the lack of loops, Act 2 will have Sonic fall into a cave, where there is no speed present, and there's even some water to slow Sonic down even further. So what this means is that we're getting a Sonic the Hedgehog game, but with most of the speed removed. The Sega Master System is not as powerful as the Genesis, so it's possible these were all done to help make a game that could run on this console, no pun intended. This change means that 8-bit Sonic 1 can feel a little generic at points. This doesn't mean that it is automatically bad, but I think what helped make the Genesis game good was how it stood out from a Super Mario game. It wasn't just a game where you could go fast. The character had the ability to roll around to gain more speed, which could also allow you to find hidden spots to reward you with extra lives, rings, etc. The best levels in that game were the ones that allowed you to do that, and had a variety of routes which could potentially shorten runs. In the 8-bit version, levels are a little closer to Marble Zone in their design, straight lines with little spots to go fast. Now you can still roll down slopes to gain some speed in this version, just not as often as the Genesis incarnation. Speaking of Marble Zone, let's talk about the levels. While Green Hill, Labyrinth, and Scrap Brain return, we have a few unique zones. Bridge is a more platforming focused zone, featuring a slow auto-scroller in Act 2. Jungle Zone is similar, though a bit longer and more challenging. The final zone in this is Skybase, which helps set up the game's finale. I like how there's a good mix of old and new zones in this game, as it helps offer a fresh experience to those that have played the Genesis version. I like to think that Sonic simply went down a different path when pursuing Dr. Eggman on his run through South Island, and that all of the Genesis zones are still in this game. Sonic just doesn't get to go through them in this alternate timeline. Now, I am not entirely against the design changes to the levels, but I do have some gripes with this game. The health system is identical to the 16-bit version, but Sonic cannot collect any rings he loses. Speaking of rings, 100 still gives you an extra life, but the counter resets to 0, which just feels wrong. Aside from it resulting in a drop in the ring bonus, it makes Sonic prone to death should he take a hit after collecting 100. The shield power-up returns, but there is no invincibility period after taking a hit, so you'll likely lose your rings as well, kind of defeating the purpose of the shield. There's also a new monitor that has a down arrow, which is this version's checkpoint. It works correctly, but it's certainly strange. Just like the Genesis game, you fight Eggman in the third act of a zone. Unlike the Genesis game, these third acts are very small and have no rings. Each Eggman fight is unique, just like the 16-bit counterpart, and these are all original concepts too. I don't like the fights as much though. On the Genesis, it was easy to wail on Eggman repeatedly until he dropped. Using that same strategy here will more often than not result in death, and since there are no rings to help you, these become hard to deal with as a result. These fights are more of a test of patience, and can become a bit tiresome, especially if Fat Ass here lands a hit when you're about to take him out. This point is especially noticeable in the final boss. This fight kicked my ass so hard in my unrecorded run, I had to use multiple continues just to beat Eggman. As for the positives, this game improves both special stages and emerald hunting. In order to enter a special stage, you must bring 50 rings to the signpost, and that's it. There is no giant ring to jump into with a small time window to do it. Chaos Emeralds are also now found inside the levels themselves. The slower pace of this game makes hunting for these less of a chore, since you're less likely to blast past these. As for the special stages, these are just colorful rooms with large pools of rings, an extra life or two, and it continues should you lose every life. This is just much better than the approach the Genesis version chose. Collecting every emerald will once again nab you a better ending, but instead of extra flowers, we see Scrap Brain get removed completely from South Island, which just feels better than the Genesis one. The presentation is also great in this game. While the game may not be as stunning as the Genesis version, the graphics are really nice to look at, and the background details are really nice in some zones. The music doesn't have as many standouts as its 16-bit relative, but the ones that do are incredible. Everybody loves Bridge Zone for its music, myself included, but I'm a big fan of Labyrinth and Scrap Brain, which have original songs rather than just reusing the Genesis ones. Shout out to Jungle Zone, which sounds like the kind of song some jackass would put in his end cards in a YouTube video. So, what is the verdict on the Sega Master System version of Sonic the Hedgehog 1? Personally, I don't think this version hits the same highs as the Genesis one, but I think it's more consistently made overall, and as a result, I think it's actually debatably the better game. I give Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Master System a 7.5 out of 10. Though not by much, I personally think this is the superior version of Sonic 1. Though at the same time, I kind of go back and forth on which version of Sonic 1 I prefer. I think I find myself playing the Genesis one more, but if I were to make the argument over which game is better made overall, I'd have to go with this one, if only for the fact that the difficulty is better balanced, and for the fact that the game is more consistent in its overall design. If you think the Sega Genesis version of this game is better, that's totally cool. Though I'm gonna go with my gut and just say that I think this one is better. If you want to play Sonic 1 on the Master System, then I've got some bad news for you. Unfortunately, this game has not been re-released anywhere near as much as the Genesis version. It did make its way to the Nintendo Wii Shop channel back in the day, however that service has shut down a while ago. If you do happen to own a Sega Master System or a Sega Power base converter for your Genesis, then this game won't cost you too much, so as long as you import it from another country. But before you do that, the exact same game made its way over to the Sega Game Gear. Let's take a quick look at that version. I won't dwell too long on this port, but it was done very well. The resolution is smaller than the Master System game, but the developers still took the time to make this game feel not only faithful, but good to play on the Game Gear. Yes, this version has its moments of screen crunch BS, but compared to Sonic Genesis on the GBA, it's non-existent. The level designs got minor tweaks, mostly due to the screen size, but otherwise this game is the same. The bosses with Eggman saw some minor changes, and are significantly easier. Like, look at this pathetic Green Hill boss. This change can be seen as a positive depending on who you are though. I will give this game the same score as the Master System release, because I think the changes are too small to really spend time picking them apart from one another. This version is a bit more common. Not only is the Game Gear cartridge cheaper, but this game got a few ports in games like Sonic Adventure DX and Sonic Mega Collection Plus. If you don't want to bother with the Master System version, the Game Gear one should satisfy you. But now we're moving on to the sequel, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Is this game better than the original? You'll have to find out the answer tomorrow when SonicTember continues. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Banditex. I'll catch you in the next one.